So, after my last video on awful female characters blew up, some of you asked me to do one on male character tropes. And it's great that you guys asked me to do so, because I was also thinking about making a video on the masculine side. There are a lot of tropes to break down, but in this video, I'll focus on 4 male characters that show up everywhere in cartoons and media. And if you watched my previous videos on this topic, you know I don't just rant. I bring things down with real examples and actual narrative logic. So let's get started with the dumb muscle bully. The dumb muscle bully is one of the most overused cliches in storytelling. Usually set in middle or high school, he's often coded as a jock, athlete, or a thug who struggles academically and bullies nerds to make them do his homework. He's always portrayed the same way: raw strength, zero brain cells, and a total lack of self-control. The brute bully serves a clear narrative purpose. He is an easy antagonist, a simple conflict, and a satisfying underdog story where the weaker protagonist eventually wins. He's a symbol of the misuse of power, showing how strength can be weaponized against the vulnerable. And because he's obviously evil, intelligent, and physically dominant, stories create a comforting good versus evil binary that audiences can easily follow. But this simplicity comes at a cost. This unrealistic and simplistic trope reduces bullies to one-note tough guys paired with the dirty core trait, strong only when unchallenged, folding immediately when consequences appear. This makes the serious issue predictable and unthreatening. By portraying bullies as obviously evil and cowardly, stories suggest victims only need to punch the bully for problems to magically solve, ignoring the complex reality of social dynamics, manipulation, and long-term emotional damage. Real bullying isn't always physical, it's often subtle, psychological, or social, and can come from seemingly harmless people. Constantly showing the big brute vs small victim caricature is ignoring many real types of abuse and victims, giving a surface-level picture. This archetype reinforces the false idea that being very strong or physically large is automatically linked to low intelligence, and that physical power comes with aggression and cruelty. It's the same outdated brain versus brawn binary that storytelling still can't let go of. Where's the room for guys who are both strong or smart, or physically imposing but kind? Let's take an example of Nelson. He is the best example of the stereotypical dumb muscle bully. He's a one-dimensional source of conflict and comedy, existing purely to be the school bully. The real problem is narrative inconsistency and lack of growth. The Simpsons almost never allows Nelson to actually grow from these insights. Any potential for change is reset by the next episode, making his tragic backstory feel like a shallow excuse rather than a reason to evolve. However, for Nelson's defense, it's important to note that he's written so one-dimensional like that on purpose, because The Simpsons is an adult episodic sitcom that is still ongoing, not a narrative-driven show like The Last Airbender. So yeah, you know they're not designed for long-term evolution. Nelson functions mostly as a satirical archetype, a tool for writers to comment on bullies and schoolyard dynamics, rather than an evolving, fully fleshed out character. To be fair, some episodes show him having surprising skills, like planning protest or acing a test. But these moments of character development only applies to this episode. Episodes sometimes explore his tragic home life, his neglectful, often absent mother, and his father who abandoned him, which make him sympathetic. On the other hand, if you want a three-dimensional version, look at Flash Thompson from Spider-Man. He started as the classic high school jerk jock who torments Peter Parker, but his character becomes one of the most compelling redemption arcs in comics. When you dig into his appearances across comics, animated series, and even games, you see how each version refines the core idea instead of flattening it. Flash's journey from bully to hero is driven by real motivation and sustained growth. His initial aggression is rooted in an abusive home life. He has a violent father, creating a cycle of pain he initially perpetuates. But unlike Nelson, Flash actually changes. He loses both legs in military service, battles alcoholism, and must constantly fight the corrupting influence of the Venom symbiote while trying to be a hero like his idol, Spider-Man. These aren't just quirks, they are genuine lasting flaws with severe consequences that he works tirelessly to overcome. Flash evolves through new stages, from bully to bully turned buddy with Peter, to anti-hero as Agent Venom, and finally to accept the hero as agent anti-venom. His strength transforms from a tool of intimidation into one of protection and sacrifice. Flash proves that a character can start as a brute and achieve profound depth and purpose. After looking at these examples, you can clearly see why writers should not miss opportunities to craft a nuanced conflict if they want their stories to stand out. Now let's take a look to his opposite. The geek or nerd is another heavily overused archetype. He is usually the sidekick or supporting character and rarely the main lead. You've seen this guy a million times. Glasses, freckles, niche hobbies, or an unfashionable fit. He's extremely intelligent but physically weak. He often contrasts with the strong, dumb jock and is frequently their target, though in rare cases they might be friends. Socially, he's awkward, isolated, unsuccessful romantically, or lacking physical cool. Despite geek culture becoming popular, media refuses to update this archetype. And if you've ever been a part of a geek community, you know how tiring this caricature is. Historically, nerds and geeks were framed negatively. Losers, unattractive, and uncool, partly because their intelligence and interest in science or pop culture weren't mainstream. When they explain something with technical terms, everyone around them, except maybe another local nerd, completely tunes out. These characters are deprived from a huge range of personalities as they are flattened into one limiting box. And because media presents nerds as outcasts, real people with similar hobbies can feel alienated or judged. It creates a stigma around enjoying science, computers, games, or anything geeky, which kills diversity in communities like tech, gaming, and science. Milos is an example of the stereotypical nerd trope. He's a one-dimensional punching bag whose only purpose is to suffer and be the butt of jokes. His character is almost entirely defined by perpetual misery, poor luck, and unrequited loyalty to Bart Simpson. His intelligence is rarely portrayed as a strength. Instead, his nerdy traits, classes, allergies, timid nature are cast as sources of mockery for both his peers and the narrative itself. There's no growth, no agency, just an endless cycle of humiliation. It makes sense that he's presented like this in this kind of TV shows. His character worked very well, especially in old episodes. However, Milos became a victim of flanderization, where a character is reduced to an exaggerated version of their original self. When Milos first showed up, he wasn't just your standard nerdy sidekick. He had a distinct personality, specific fears, unique quirks, and a genuinely believable friendship with Bart. Throughout the series, the character's repeated social failures and physical shortcomings are excessively exaggerated for simple comedy. He mostly functions to enable Bart's casual meanness or as an easy target for jokes. His geek identity becomes his entire narrative role, a complete trap set by the trope, rather than just one aspect of his personality. However, this isn't always the case, and there are positive, deeper portrayals. Let's take Peter Parker as the gold standard for how to execute well or subvert the geek trope. He is the quintessential nerd done right, demonstrating how this trait can create compelling, relatable conflict. Across all versions and types of media, Peter starts as the classic high school nerd, brilliant, socially awkward, and bullied. But these traits aren't his final form, they're his narrative origin. His intellectual curiosity is directly responsible for his powers, and his social struggle ground his early stories in relatable teen angst. What makes Peter work is that his geek persona is intrinsically linked to his core flaws and the central theme of his story, responsibility. His initial self-interest, born from wanting to use his powers for personal gain, leads directly to Uncle Ben's death. Parker luck, where the superhero duties constantly ruin his personal life, is an evolution of the nerd traditional social misfortune, adding moral consequences. Unlike characters who shed their nerdy trait upon gaining power, Peter remains fundamentally himself. He's often broke, struggles to maintain relationships, and uses his scientific intellect to solve problems as Spider-Man. The trope provides the foundation for a character whose greatest battles are as much about personal sacrifice and moral choices as they are about supervillains. Nuanced handling can make the archetype positive, showcases admirable intellectual passion, emotional depth, challenging the popularity equals value idea, and representing diverse nerds. Media is slowly moving towards this, but progress varies. But of course, we can't talk about these archetypes without mentioning the himbo. The himbo is the male counterpart of the bimbo. The term mixes him and bimbo. The himbo is exactly what the term suggests: an attractive, physically ideal man, typically muscular, charming, and sometimes athletic, who, despite his looks, is not very bright but possesses an endearingly sweet and adorable personality. The archetype emerged in the late 80s as a male version of the bimbo stereotype, and over the time, it evolved into something more humorous and affectionate. The best part of a himbo is that he is the total opposite of a harsh, aggressive macho man. He's strong, but he's also kind and harmless, offering a great change from harmful ideas of masculinity. In modern storytelling, he is often used to contrast with an enterprising female lead, but if poorly written, his role exists only to make the strong female character look better. At first, this trope seems like a positive one, but of course, audience has noticed some problems about this trope. This archetype can reinforce the idea that attractive people are dumb, especially since they often lack significant depth or development beyond their looks. The bimbo, like his female equivalent, the bimbo, risks being reduced to pure fan service. While the bimbo stereotype reduces women to sexy but dumb, the bimbo reduces men to muscle, readiness, and a lack of intellect, leaving no inner life or depth, just eye candy, which is reductive for people and keeps the brains versus looks cliché alive. Furthermore, the himbo trope can slip into ableist territory. When writers turn a character's lack of intelligence into a sexual trait or running joke, it gets uncomfortable. Some critics even point out a fetishization of dumb men, which creates weird power dynamics. The himbo trope can accidentally promote rigid beauty standards too. Even though the himbo isn't toxic, he usually fits the mold: tall, muscular, handsome, and perfect. So we're really just swapping one narrow standard for another. If this is the gold standard, it seriously limits how we portray different kinds of masculinity. However, the himbo can transcend the trope if the character possesses real emotions, a genuine purpose in the story, and authentic flaws and potential for growth. When writers grant him depth and agency, his soft masculinity can be genuinely refreshing. Let's take a look at Fred Jones from Scooby-Doo. He is a classic example of a character who evolved into the himbo role, often to highlight the brilliance of the female lead, Velma. Fred is the conventionally handsome, athletic, kind-hearted leader of the group, known for his simple, good-natured demeanor and fierce loyalty. However, his himbo persona is rooted in an intellectual blind spot. While he is technically the leader, his mind is perpetually focused on overly elaborate, impractical, and often failing traps. A unique obsession that becomes cartoon shorthand for his intellectual simplicity outside of Velma's domain. In earlier cartoons, Fred could be an effective planner, but his later himbofication was a deliberate creative choice in subsequent iterations, like Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. He remains a good, classic example of the trope because he retains a useful skill, which is trap building, but uses it for airheaded comedic effect. In contrast, Ken across the various Barbie animated universes is arguably the best modern execution of the intentional Sephora himbo trope. Designed to be the perfect default Ken doll, impeccably stylized and physically fit, he is defined by an unwavering kindness, emotional sincerity, and non-threatening nature. Unlike Fred, his emotional maturity is often quite high. Ken's character is a direct inversion of the bimbo stereotype. His intellectual blind spot and career path, often ambiguously defined as just Ken, are intentional satire. His core purpose is to be the Barbie supportive partner or accessory, making him the literal arm candy for the highly successful female protagonist. His lack of complex personal drive is not poor writing. It is his purpose. It's a statement on how society views supportive male partner in a female-centric world, making him the quintessential modern cartoon himbo. These three tropes are often found in academic settings, but there are also some in family settings like the famous useless father. The useless father, or useless dad, is a super common cartoon trope. Like, very common cartoon trope. You know, the main character's dad is usually a clumsy goofball, totally outshined by the mom who does all the work and knows what's up. He's totally lost when it comes to basic dad stuff and housework, barely keeping his head above water in daily life. In contrast, the useless dad has a job, often a complex one where he's completely competent, creating a strange dichotomy with his total incompetence at home. He can manage complex work challenges but can't figure out how to operate the washing machine or pack a lunch. If you've ever watched any sitcom from the 80s onward, you've seen these tropes shoved in your face non-stop, because this version of fatherhood is everywhere. Literally. Their typical attire is often a white shirt and a dark lower garment. They went from the smart, calm authority figures in the 50s and 60s to the clueless buffoon stereotype since the 80s, where the mom usually fixes everything. Each shift often serves as an exaggerated and satirical version of the traditional family roles, where the dad works and provides, while the mom literally handles all domestic duties, including parenting. Today, this portrayal is so normalized that people barely question it. Problems met by this trope is that it positions dads as the secondary parent. He's treated like the extra adult who can mess up without real consequences. The mother, or someone else, is seen as the real parent. It reinforces the idea that men are naturally bad at caregiving, that fathers can't handle kids, emotion, or household tasks, which also reinforces the old stereotype that caregiving is a female job. Media normalizes laughing at male incompetence, especially in parenting, by often making the dad the joke. Instead of showing a father with real feelings or nuance, he becomes a caricature. It flattens an entire aspect of masculinity into a joke. The shallow trope misrepresents reality, devalues fatherhood, reinforces sexism, negatively influences children's views of masculinity, restricts narrative possibilities, and conflicts with the modern reality of actively involved fathers. One famous example is Homer Simpson. He is the quintessential bumbling dad, a character designed to subvert the wise, capable fathers of the 1950s sitcoms. However, his characterization has come to represent the problematic core of the useless father trope. He has launched the trend of this trope. Homer is overwhelmingly defined by his vices, laziness, gluttony, and a prevalent lack of common sense. His role as a father is frequently undercut by these traits. He is depicted as incapable of basic tasks, neglectful, and even cruelly dominant, famously strangling his son Bart. The narrative frames his inability to parent as cheap, repetitive humor that reinforces the idea that fathers are simply too incompetent to be responsible. The formulaic nature of the show, his moment of growth only matters in said episode. His family may guide him, but the status quo is always restored by the next episode. The static nature reinforces a harmful message, that men are infantile by default and that women must parent a husband. This portrayal trivializes fatherhood and suggests men are secondary or unimportant in family life. While Homer is sympathetic due to his underlying love for his family, this love often feels like a narrative excuse for his behavior rather than a catalyst for change. The show asks viewers to laugh at his destructive incompetence and then forgive him because he means well, a cycle that has led to significant cultural pushback in recent years. On the other hand, some famous shows has managed to subvert the useless dad trope. Let's take a look at Richard Watterson. He's absolutely an incompetent father figure, but the amazing world of Gumball uses that incompetence with purpose. The show turns what could have been a lazy stereotype into something genuinely thoughtful, using Richard's flaws to build character depth and explore how this chaotic family actually works. He's basically the extreme version of the useless dad trope. It doesn't even work, he doesn't manage the house, and Nicole ends up carrying every traditional responsibility. But instead of playing it straight for cheap laughs, the series uses this role reversal to highlight the strained dynamics and odd balance within the Watterson household. Richard's behavior isn't just a pile of random quirks. The show gives him a clear sympathetic origin, a childhood smothered by an overprotective mother that left him emotionally stunted. His immaturity becomes something rooted in his upbringing, not just a comedic punchline, which instantly makes him more layered than the typical buffoon dad. And despite his chaos, Richard's love for his family is real and active. His affection isn't just stated, it drives episode forward. In the hero episode, Campbell and Darwin come to realize how deeply their father cares after they accidentally hurt his feelings and then try to prove he's still their hero, a storyline that forces both the characters and the audience to reassess what being a dad actually means. You can clearly see how the show uses Richard's flaws to explore family dynamics instead of hiding behind the trope. What really makes him stand out is how the series challenges the trope instead of reinforcing it. The show gives Richard flashes of unexpected capability and emotional sincerity, moments that make the narrative richer than a simple comedy gag. Richard is still a useless dad, but the story treats his flaws as something worth engaging with, something the family responds to, learns from, and ultimately grows around. His attempts to be better, even when they're clumsy, reveal the sincerity under all the absurdity and makes him a flawed but genuinely important part of this messy, functional family. I've demonstrated that even overused and potentially misleading mere stereotypes can be effectively subverted to create unique and compelling characters. Tropes like the useless dad or bully, whether in serialized or episodic narratives, can serve as a foundation for developing fully fleshed out individuals. So thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to not miss any upcoming content. And share your thoughts about these tropes in the comment section down below. What male tropes annoys you the most? Or which characters do you think breaks the mold? See you in the next video. Goodbye!